and welcome. It's another fabulous Confessions broadcast from your friends here at BBC Radio 2, where we have the cinniest listeners, because this week we have a collection which includes Accidents Will Happen. These are the titles of the Confessions, by the way, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about. Accidents Will Happen, Boy on a Train, Just Hold On to What You've Got, and Keep the Home Fires Burning. Here they all come. Dear Father Simon, I wish to apply for absolution. Earlier this year, I went into a famous and well... Do we PG this? No?
Wow.
No, it's fine.
No, those are good, yeah.
Well, I think it's okay.
That's fine then.
I wish to apply for absolution. Earlier this year, I went onto a famous and well-known website to help me choose the best property to spend a week's holiday in. The criteria was simple. We needed somewhere nicer than our current house, so that when we got away, we felt spoilt and happy. To find a suitable property, we selected a 5-star, popular and incredibly expensive cottage, which was open to receiving small and well-behaved dogs. The booking was made, bags packed, and the dog was squashed into the back seat, awaiting the long drive up to the beautiful and inspiring Northumberland coast. Unfortunately, we don't come from a posh place, and the owners didn't quite expect to receive a dirty old car parking on the driveway of the very nice and well-appointed residence. The neighbours gave us a quizzical look as we opened the door of our new home for the week, probably because the small, well-behaved dog was in fact a lively and energetic Springer Spaniel that was dying for a wee after such a long drive. The front garden, which was nicely decorated with flowering plants and tulips, got a watering courtesy of the scruffy Springer. But that's the way nature intends these things to continue. The next day we wandered out of our doorway onto the nearby beach, and we spent many happy hours running up and down the sand dunes and getting the dog to chase the ball into the sea. The dog had no problem swallowing mouthfuls of seawater. Blimey, so we got dogs that eat bees and now dogs swallowing seawater, whilst gathering up the ball which floated on the surf. Back at the beautifully decorated and furnished home, a few rules were put in place to keep the lodgers happy. The most important one being that there should be no dogs upstairs. I think this is fair enough. The kind owner had even put a child stair gate at the bottom of the stairs to ensure the little well-behaved dogs couldn't run up the stairs and surprise their owners. The other rule was that no pet should be left on their own. Knowing that our pooch was suitably tired after a day at the beach, we promptly disregarded the second rule and left him alone in the house as we wandered across the street to the nearby pub for a gorgeous meal and a few pints of local ale.
Oh, well, that's fine then, because obviously that rule didn't apply, because he's a bit tired. Right, okay. Yeah.
Have you made your judgment?
Yeah.
The jury is in. The small and well-behaved dog woke up when we closed the door and promptly sprung over the stairgate and up the stairs to the master bedroom. We learnt all this later. The seawater had swollen his bladder and he needed to relieve himself right at that very moment. When we came home, the smell was quite obvious and our noses twitched. The stairgate was still closed and we searched downstairs for the offending puddle. Eyes wide, we started the long journey up the stairs and found a distinct yellow patch in the middle of our duck and feather down duvet. Our super expensive duck and feather down duvet. We gathered up the king-size problem and bundled it into a couple of black bin bags. The dog waited with a guilty look on his face at the bottom of the stairs behind the stairgate. We let him out into the front garden as we needed time out to think what we were going to do. We slept in the spare room that night, and the following morning the current husband wanted to take the evidence down to the local laundrette, which was over 30 miles away. Selfishly, Father Simon, I didn't want to spend the day doing washing, and I had a sudden wave of inspiration.
Go on then.
I decided to blame it on my husband. He's the right sort of age after all.
Oh, really? Right.
And I promptly phoned the lady owner and informed her that my husband had had an accident and could she come over and collect the evidence.
Oh.
Obviously, my husband died of shock and embarrassment and tried to take the phone from me, but as I'm an ex-gymnast, he didn't succeed. He didn't like being blamed for the spaniel's leakage, but that little white lie saved us having to waste a day washing and hide the fact that the dog had broken the rules. The lady owner was brilliant and understanding. She knew exactly what it meant to have a leaky husband. Our shared empathy allowed all hints of embarrassment to disappear as she mopped up the circumstances of our predicament and gave us the rest of our holiday back. Sadly, my husband was not so impressed with my cunning plan and wanted to leave the residence straight away, which you can kind of understand, really. Fortunately, after a cup of tea, he calmed down, and I took him for another walk along the beautiful Northumberland coastline. The Squirty Spaniel was never left alone again, and regular trips to the bathroom were made to ensure no more accidents happened. But I do need to ask for your forgiveness for embarrassing my husband and lying to the lovely lady owner who had such a beautiful home that they'd rented out to willing visitors who all followed the rules perfectly, except us, because they didn't apply to us, because the dog, as Matt correctly pointed out, was tired. Thank you, Miss Potty. Well, I didn't see it coming, really. But anyway, what do you think about that, Sister Bobby?
It was great. It was lovely. The divine Miss Potty. That's what you are now, because I think that's just a fabulous story. And also, what a surprise. I didn't see that coming at all. It
Why
was
not?
inspired.
Fine, inspired. So put it on yourself. Why didn't you say, because I've had it?
No, it's one of those things, you see, that he was part of this, is he colluded. He went, let's leave the dog. Let's not make sure it's gone to the toilet first before we go to the pub. I don't mind leaving your dog as long as you know your dog and it's fine and it's tired. But they should have made the dog relieve itself. So you can't blame the dog. It's not the dog's fault.
No, but
so
the woman could have blamed herself.
No, that'd be a terrible thing.
Why not?
Just blame the husband.
I've had a
That's
little
perfectly
accident.
fine, apparently.
The thing is, you could have taken it to the laundrette and left it on a service wash. You could have done that at the very least. But I have to say, I think it's so inspired. I'm loving it. You're forgiven.
Right. Okay, that's one for you, Miss P. What do you say there, Brother Matthew?
I mean, number one, obviously, the rule was there that you decided to flout with your decision to... I mean, the dog could have gone to the pub. There's one idea. Here's another. But I do like the idea that you're using the embarrassment factor. Using your husband's embarrassment to be able to get you out of having to return your deposit or whatever it was that you would have lost by having that sort of...
wet duvet.
A wet duvet. But here is where it all comes down, I think, is that I think that having a duck and feather down duvet is a little too ostentatious for my tastes in the bedroom. I think it's a little bit too much, a little too fabulous. So I am going to forgive because, frankly, duck and feather down duvet in the bedroom, deserve everything that's coming your way.
Care and Collective. Having listened and laughed so often at the sins of others, I'm finally coming to you in the hope you can lift the guilt from my own shoulders. Tale takes back in spring 1994 whilst living in Thames Ditton and taking the train every day to London to work. There's quite a lot of train timetable information on this, Bobby. You're going to love it. I was young, life was good, and the best part about life at that time was a beautiful young Polish girl whom I'd been for a coffee with twice. That's how good it was. Eventually, I'd plucked up enough courage to ask her out for a proper date in the evening, because all proper dates are in the evening. Coffee's fine, flapjacks are fine, but if you're going to have a date, it's got to be in the evening. This is what was happening. The much-anticipated day had arrived, a Wednesday, as I remember. My plan had been to set off at Thames Ditton, the station closest to my house, drop my briefcase off, and then drive my old car to the family she was staying with in Kew. The butterflies had started around lunchtime, and by the time I got on the train, the nervousness was unbearable, as I knew there would only be one chance, and this person had many, many admirers. I always took the Hampton Court train, and the last three stops were Surbiton, Thames Ditton, and Hampton Court, just in case you might need to remember that, which was the end of the line. Sometimes a train was held up indefinitely at Surbiton, meaning that we had to jump off and get a connecting train to Hampton Court. Unfortunately, this was one of those days. I ran off the stationary train, eager to board the one that would get me home, and I made it on. As the doors closed and we pulled off, to my utter, total despair, I realised my briefcase was on the other train.
Oh, no.
No.
Simon, I can only put this extraordinary act of forgetfulness down to my nerves. But all was not lost. My choice was to go to Hampton Court, to wait for the delayed train to bring my briefcase to me, which could take ages if it came at all, or turn around at the next station, Thames Ditton, and go back to Surbiton and collect the bag. What should he do? Bobby? No, Matt?
wait at Hampton Court because you don't know when the train's going to leave the other one, don't you?
Well, I chose the latter.
Oh,
All went well. I got the train back to Surbiton, but as we approached the station where the train and my briefcase were, that train started to continue its journey to Hampton Court.
Of course it did. That's
And
what
we
I just
passed
said.
each other while I stared helplessly. If only I'd listened to Matt's advice. I'm ad-libbing now. Fortunately, as I stood on the Surbiton platform, another train going into Hampton Court pulled in. Surely this one could take me to the end of the line where the train and the briefcase would be. We waited for the doors of this train to open and waited. I wished for one of those mobile phones that more and more people seem to have to phone my date to say I was in an important meeting. Then, just when things couldn't get any worse, they got worse. The speaker came on and announced that... That's not the House of Commons speaker. This is like the loudspeakers.
Yes,
Come on.
yeah.
Right. And announced that all trains going in and out of Hampton Court had been suspended due to a suspect package.
Oh, yes.
For a split second, I cursed the idiot who had destroyed my evening, swearing noticeably louder than the other commuters on the platform. When I suggested to the attendant that it was my package, he invited me into his office while he made a call to Hampton Court. On the phone, he said something like, yes, really, I know, yes. Then he ran out, came back in and said, on the train now! We rode the train to Hampton Court, just the attendant, the driver and me. On the way, he said the Flying Eye had made a diversion to check the unfolding situation, and the bomb squad had even been informed. All I could think of was how far a happy end to this day now seemed. Eventually we arrived at Hampton Court and he told me to go and look for the briefcase on the train parked alongside whilst he waited. We were about halfway down the platform, which was completely deserted except for a crowd of people, including police, way back at the barrier. I got on the train and saw my case, the suspect package. I should probably mention that my briefcase was an old-style one, and the corner lining was wearing away, revealing coloured plastic tubing.
Oh, no.
Which could be mistaken,
Yeah.
as you would realise. Not wanting to do the walk of shame in full view of everyone, I chose to make my way down the central aisle of the train, where I'd found my briefcase, emerging from the carriage closest to the barrier, holding my briefcase under my shirt. Wow. As I did so, at least 20 heads ducked down, slowly coming up again as they realised it was safe and I was okay. Getting back to the house, my landlord asked if I'd been held up too, and on finally picking up my date, 2 hours late, she said she guessed I'd been delayed in the bomb scare, not realising that the suspect package was actually in the back seat of the car, because I was the culprit. So I obviously need to apologise to everybody caught in the traffic going in and out of Hampton Court, the traffic reporters who had to do extra work on this particular day.
Imagine that.
Yeah, because all the roads were closed, to those stranded in trains, but also to the beautiful Polish girl who somehow eventually became my wife.
Wow.
Nice.
That's all right then. The only hint of a defence I can offer is that I'd never left anything on a train before, and I haven't done since. It truly was a mistake. At the very worst time and place, I commit myself to your mercy. You have to be very, very careful, obviously, about what you leave. And he was just nervous. It was the date. She had a beautiful Polish girl, but that bit is all fine because beautiful Polish girl fell in love with beautiful James. What do you think, Sister Bobby, then?
Well, it sounds like a Richard Curtis film, doesn't it? It's
does.
just that, it's all there and beautiful locations. You know, Hampton Court, what a great station to have that kind of romantic journey on. The thing is, there's nothing really to forgive. It's a genuine mistake. Your reason for your forgetfulness, of course, is lovely. To be so kind of in a 2 and 8 because you're going to meet this amazing person at the other end. I mean, we've all done that.
In a right 2 and 8.
In a right 2 and 8.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's what they say in Thames Ditton.
James, you laugh at the sins of others. We're kind of glowing here because that's just a beautiful.
If this was a Richard Curtis
love story.
script,
Yeah.
James would be like Hugh Grant,
Yes.
I think. And when all that cursing that he talked about, that would be like posh cursing, which doesn't count as much.
Apparently, yeah. Apparently
What do you
that's
think,
okay.
Brother
Yeah.
Matthew?
Different times, of course, and times now a little bit more stressful. They were different times.
Yeah. Don't
But
leave
I
your
think,
case on the
given the
train.
fact that you married her, all is forgiven.
What do you say there, Brother
Well,
Matthew?
what I say is it sounds like he had his own train. There was a point there where it's just him, the guard, and the driver on it. He got his
was
own
being
train.
taken, I think,
That's
'cause
amazing.
yeah.
Wow, his own train. I am definitely going to forgive, as long as, I mean, you'd obviously have to use this story on that date. You'd have to, because part of the reason why he was nervous is he doesn't know what he's going to be saying to this gorgeous Polish girl, and now he's got an amazing story. You know, you open with that story. Let me tell you about the suspect correct device, my dear. Turns out it was my bag. And
That is how they speak in Thames Ditton.
Yeah, absolutely. That is how they. Yeah. So I am going to forgive as long as you use that line, because that line's too good to give up.
This story comes from Mary. Dear Father Simon and the collective, I have a confession to make. I've wanted to tell you for years and years, and I finally got round to writing it. When I was 13, I went on a school trip to Austria. There were many students on this school trip, and from all year groups right up to sixth form. Therefore, as a mere second-year timid schoolgirl who wouldn't put a step wrong, I felt quite overwhelmed and intimidated amongst so many more confident and older peers. I therefore intended to stick with my few close friends and keep my head down out of the way of any comments or practical jokes that were frequently handed out by some of the older, peskier students. The chosen transportation for our one-week trip to Austria was by coach. So 2 coaches, full of noisy, spotty teenagers, departed Kent and via the ferry progressed towards Austria. It was very late on in the journey and I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Decided to make the walk along the coach towards the toilet at the back. Now, when it came to flushing the toilet, I saw that there were 2 levers. I should mention here that it had only been on the previous week that I'd been in my friend's caravan and had been told by her father that I should pull the lever from under the toilet. So when I was ready to flush on the coach, I looked at the toilet and the 2 lever options opened to me, and I took a moment to think, and I thought back to my friend's caravan, and I decided to use the almost hidden lever which was under the toilet.
Oh no.
I then went happily back to my seat because I had followed the rules,
Yes.
I'd followed the instructions, I had done the right thing.
Yeah.
And I was not standing out in the crowd.
The key word there was almost hidden, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay.
This happiness, Father Simon, did not last long, says Mary. The coach had been at Germany's border control and had just started to pull away
Oh no.
when it came to an abrupt halt. There was a moment's silence as students stared out of the left-hand window, followed by shouts of, "Who went to the toilet last then?" Student staff and the red-faced, angry coach driver from the East End of London, who by this point was storming down the aisle of the coach, started pointing at me, shouting, "You've just been to the toilet, haven't you? Because the whole of the contents of the toilet since our departure from Kent has emptied itself onto the road at the German border, and they don't take too kindly to that sort of thing. Yes, the entire contents is on the side of the road, and it's all down to you."
Right.
All eyes were on me, Father Simon. What could I say apart from, "Oh no, I was just doing my hair"? That's what. Yeah, no, I went ages ago. It's not me. I just see this. I just need to put a flick in my hair. That's what I was doing. I blushed. I felt very guilty, but I put my head down, engrossing myself in my magazine, my Disco 45, which I'd already read 3 times over by now. At this point, the other coach had come back, and we were all told that the toilet on our coach must have a fault, and therefore, for the remaining hours of the journey, we had to hold it. Or we'd have to stop both coaches and use the other coach, which we ended up doing several times to extend this journey even further, which was agonising anyway, but now was very agonising for everybody.
Oh dear.
Can we again? I didn't dare say I needed the toilet for the rest of the trip. So I obviously need to plead forgiveness from the coach drivers who, having driven for endless hours on this trip, then spent an additional 4 hours on our arrival at Austria, stripping back and attempting to fix a toilet which wasn't even broken. But also for all of the students who had to announce each time they needed the toilet and go through the embarrassment of getting both coaches to stop for them so that they could move coach to do their business. In addition, of course, to the German border control, who had a little bit of clearing up to do. And as the coach driver said, they don't like that kind of thing. Well, indeed, who does? So, anyway, Mary tells a story, and you can understand that she was... See, the thing is, she was just trying to do the right thing. She found the lever, the almost hidden lever. Maybe that was the thing, as Matt correctly says. But she was desperately trying to do the right thing, and she ended up making a little bit of a Kazi of the situation. What would you say, Sister Bobby?
The thing is, Mary was only 13, and the other thing is, I don't know all Blackwater storage kind of contraptions, but I know a few that if you've got a mobile vehicle, usually there's a valve on outside the vehicle. So I'd be really surprised if her actions to undo the one on the inside released everything out to the floor, because usually that's outside and you pull it open and then everything is exported. So I can think, actually, the problem is, there's two problems. First of all, is how Mary was treated. She was only 13, poor girl, and she didn't know, and she did her best. Secondly, the coach driver, I think, left the valve open on the outside of the vehicle.
Could you draw me a diagram of this?
Yeah, could actually.
I'm a little
So Blackwater storage tanks, they have a valve on the outside. You connect a pipe to it, usually an extendable one, then it goes into the drains. So there you go. So I think actually the problem lies with the driver.
Okay.
That the valve was open on the outside. I've
So
never
you're
known a
forgiving
valve on
Mary?
the inside. Absolutely, Mary. I don't think it's any of your problem, and you shouldn't worry.
Who knew all that stuff about Blackwater? Anyway.
Well,
What do you think, Brother
I
Matthew?
have to say, normally I'm not very tolerant of people who constantly need the loo, like on planes
She only went
and
once.
in movies and stuff like that. Constantly getting up, need to use the toilet all the time. So normally I would be not forgiving, but I'm agreeing with Bobby here. This valve news is I think it is definitely. There's no way just that one lever underneath the loo operates everything. There's definitely some fault here, so it's definitely the driver's fault. So I am definitely going to forgive because she did everything right, and it's your man, the driver, who realises he's made a mistake and has decided to take it out on this 13-year-old girl, and therefore is wrong in my opinion.
Gather round, here comes another drive time, which comes from Graham. That's what we're going to call him. Thank you very much. What's funny?
I've just seen a rushing Nigel go past the door.
You see,
He's going to come in any minute.
He's always rushing because he's always...
Hey, it's
All right,
Nige,
Nige.
everyone.
It's Nigel with his savoury cake. Look, everybody. All right, Nige.
Yeah, nice out. On the balcony.
Right, okay, so here we go with tonight's tale. This comes from La-di-da Gunner Graham. Dear Simon and the Eminences Grease, I ask you to imagine the year 1975 in a Royal Air Force base somewhere in Norfolk. This, I have to say, is a very rare confession from a member of the armed forces. Normally, they don't get through.
Yeah.
In fact, I read one this morning. Oh, my goodness me. The amount of thing... I mean, it was an entertaining read, but it involved theft. It involved dangerous use of an electric pylon, everything. So, I mean, it was fun for me, but it was never going to get on. But thanks very much.
Was it a general? Did you do
Throwing
well?
stone? No. It was anyway, never mind. I was a young single senior aircraftsman, Father Simon, only 19 years old, working as a filing clerk, as the Ops Eng Registry on the base, which is basically a sort of library for official files. Along with me was another young clerk. I'm going to call him Al. He was a great guy, and we two got along famously. Similar age, similar taste in music, and partying also, although he was a little immature. Anyway, all was well with us until the arrival of our new sergeant. He was not an ordinary sergeant, but a high-flying, in clerking, not flying aeroplane terms, man, who had reached the dizzying heights of a sergeant in his 30s. He was the anointed one. He was a man going places, again in clerking, not flying terms, and in his zeal for further promotion, he had left his sense of humour at home. We're going to call him Sergeant Williams. Well, Sergeant Williams is a married man, or in RAF parlance, a scaly, due to the pay allowance for married people in place at that time. He was a stickler for discipline. He was a stickler for tidiness as well, and filing papers with diligence. In addition, routine featured heavily in his working life, and we were expected to embrace that with the same enthusiasm as he did, although we were reluctant and poor actors, because Al and I just liked to laugh. Sergeant Williams, the paragon of virtue, did, however, have a vice. He smoked a pipe. Now, in those days, it was entirely reasonable for anyone and everyone to smoke in the workplace at all times and in all places. And being a creature of habit, he would have his first bowl of Old Scroty mid-morning and then leave it on his desk. I think that was the official name of the tobacco.
Tasty.
I really hope it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a chewing tobacco?
Now, let's
Mid-morning.
move on quickly.
Anyway, this is leave it on his desk. He was he was fond of using the pipe to point and emphasise his wisdom, and with phrases from his lexicon, such as "Smarten up, you shower." "Is your hair hurting? It should be 'cause I'm standing on it." After he It was amazing that he ended up like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, who'd have thought? Yeah.
After he returned from lunch, he would just refill the pipe on top of the cold embers of the previous smoke. Anyway, the air officer commanding's annual inspection was approaching, and to our outrage, Sergeant Williams volunteered me and Al to be the guard of honour. We were mortified and scared by the prospect of having to have proper short hair and really, really shiny shoes, let alone hours of windy, cold practice sessions on the airfield, being shouted at and ridiculed. I think it was this act which caused the spark of the rebellion to be lit, in our case, quite literally. On the following week, we focused on our brand new exciting idea, our enterprise. Wednesday was our chosen day. And as was his regular practice, the Sarge left the office to go for lunch in the married quarters, leaving his pipe unattended. I quickly dug the used old scroty out of the bowl, and Al caught it in a sheet of typing paper. We then sprinkled, here's the thing, this is what they've been buying. Anyone who had an old chemistry set will go, oh. We then sprinkled iron filings, especially sourced from the joke shop in King's Lynn, into the bottom, and we topped it up once more with the ashes before putting it back in the exact place he'd left it. This story is like something from the Beano. Upon his return, Sergeant Williams was presented with 2 young airmen studiously attending to filing and postage duties, answering the telephone with appropriate formality and generally being diligent in their duties. His eyes immediately narrowed and scanned the trays and cabinets for evidence of moral decay, or to be exact, airman shenanigans. Finding none, he retrieved the tobacco from the drawer and set about preparing his next smoke. We could hardly wait. Unfortunately, and as many a person may have experienced for themselves, fate had stepped in, and our plans were now accelerating further and faster than we had originally planned. As the first cloud of smoke ascended to the ceiling, the door to the office opened and we all looked up. Immediately, Sergeant Williams stepped to the counter, pipe in hand. "Good afternoon, sir," he began with gravitas. The man who had come in was none other than the station commander, the group captain Tippy Ashwood.
Good old Tippy.
A name which I plucked from TV.
Your next novel. Oh, okay.
No. Yes, the group captain Tippy waved a file in front of him. "Sergeant Williams," he began.
Oh, excellent. Another voice. Brilliant.
It's Kenneth Williams, surely.
Yes.
"Okay, Sergeant Williams, I really need..." And unfortunately, he got no further. He broke off in confusion. The sergeant appeared to be having a pyrotechnic fit. The pipe, now clenched between his teeth, had begun to fizz and crackle alarmingly, and then projected hundreds of shooting red and gold sparks, at least a foot high, into the void between them. His glasses sparkled in the flames, and his wide staring eyes bulged in surprise, while behind him 2 young airmen fought each other to squeeze into the walk-in cupboard. The station commander acted swiftly, dashing the pipe from the sergeant's mouth with the heavy file, then retrieving it back from the floor and dropping it into the fire bucket. "I'll pop back later, if that..." he said.
Yes.
Right.
"Thanks, Tippy."
Oh, my goodness.
The door closed quickly. From outside the cupboard, we could just see the door open again. Tippy popped his head back in. "Your chaps seem to have scarpered," he nodded towards our walk-in cupboard. "In my experience, it usually is a sign of a guilty conscience. Probably too much free time on their hands, don't you think?" The door closed for a final time. Our 2 next weekends, Father Simon, were spent painting the filing cabinets, painting the walls, painting the ceiling, painting the doors. Everything not nailed down was moved and cleaned and replaced. The lights burned long into each evening as we toiled with our punishment. We got our comeuppance, and it was a painful penance. I confess we probably deserved it too. But a Sergeant Williams family also paid, since he spent the same time with us, because he was supervising our work. So for that I apologise to Mrs. Williams and all the little Williamses for taking her husband and their dad away from them so selfishly. But I have to say it's written large in our memories, and we discuss it many years on from the event. Al and I both went on to enjoy successful careers in the RAF, as I believe did Sergeant Williams. Our career prospects undiminished by our youthful indiscretion. I hope that your munificence and generous natures will forgive 2 young airmen for their high spirits and for their daring. Thank you, La-di-da Gunner Graham, for tonight's tale. It's a kind of a fairly standard chemistry trick. Get the old iron filings into the pipe or into the cigarette and step back and watch with amusement. What do you say, Sister Bobby, who'd never do anything like that?
I would never do that. No, it's like a carry-on film, isn't it, really? It's a lovely, lovely image, actually, that they've painted there. I find it really easy to forgive on one level, because if you're in an office and it can be quite tedious and boring, it's really important to look for many ways to get yourselves through the day. However, I just have one point on this. It could have been actually quite dangerous.
Oh, I knew you were going to be health and
listen,
safety.
it just could have been, iron filings going off, no glasses. It could have actually caused some damage. So for that reason only, I love the hijinks. I love the fun. I think even Mrs. Sergeant Williams would have been actually happy for some nights off, no doubt, with the kids. Yeah,
well,
because if it's
that may
quite,
well be right.
yeah, I think so. But I'm going to say, because of the safety factor, you are not forgiven this time.
Oh, my goodness.
You're quite right, by the way. Tippy Ashwood comes from It Ain't Half Hot, Mum.
Yeah.
Played by Michael Knowles, I think, if I remember right.
Well, that's where La-Di-Da Gunnar Graham comes from, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So it's all of them, yeah,
that was
absolutely.
And Sergeant Williams was, of course, I will not have gossip in this jungle.
Yeah. Yeah, the Welsh.
Windsor Davis.
Windsor, yeah, lovely.
Anyway, carry on.
There you go. I'd always wanted to... My superhero would be Iron Filings Man rather than Iron Man or anything like that. I just think that's a lovely image because he could go off at any time. And I was... actually, Sergeant Williams could easily have lost some teeth, didn't he? Because old Tippy smacked him with the filing cabinet and then dislodged the
it was
pipe
with a
from
file,
his mouth.
not a filing cabinet. Just a file.
Slightly different. A file, that was it, without the cabinet. He'd just taken it out of the cabinet. What I don't understand is why Sergeant Williams... He didn't have to punish them because it then meant that he had to stay with them as they did their porridge. So, he didn't want to go home. Maybe that's the thought, Bobby. He didn't really have that nice home. Absolutely forgiven. Well done, Graham. And can you still buy old Scroty? That's all I'd like to know.
I don't know. What do you say about that, Matt? Do you think you can?
I think what we're going to do
nice
is,
with a little
is
rosé,
absolutely yes, move straight along.
In your hubba pipe.
I have to say I feel a certain kinship with Sergeant Williams here because he put ourselves in his shoes. He's having to deal with these two jokers, your Gunnar Graham and Alan or whatever, and all he's got in his life is his pipe. And it's the only thing that gives him any pleasure. And I know we're going and his particular brand of tobacco. That's all he's got. And they're going to put iron filings. He must have had he couldn't wait to get home. So I am going to say not forgiven because they sound rather tiresome.
Well, they were this week's confessions, and it may well be that it sparked a thought in your hardened soul. Maybe you want to send me a tale of your own. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and don't forget you can listen to all of our shows from the last 30 days on the fabulous iPlayer. On Monday, the Ready to Book Club was up and running with Jason Arnott in the studio talking about his brand new book and his first book too. Tuesday, the reigning Bake-Off champion Nadia Hussein was in. Yuval Noah Harari, the brightest person that we've ever had on the programme probably. He joined us on Wednesday to talk about his new book, which is called Homo Deus, all about the future. And Nigel served up savoury cheese and olive cake with chili and smoked paprika. I've been saying paprika all my life. I now realise I'm the only one that's been saying it like that, which makes me a little foolish. Details on the Radio 2 website. You just head for the Thursday episode page, toggle down. It'll take like a day, but you'll get there. You'll hit the recipe. And if you do actually get to this point in the podcast and you're still there as you're unloading the shopping or you're in the gym or you're going for a walk, if you do that Twitter thing, can you tweet, "Can we have a proper cake, please, Nigel?" Thanks.